And that is where we start today with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. Also joining us, congressional reporter for The Hill, Michael Schnell, and with me at the table, opinion writer at the New York Times and MSNBC political analyst, Mara Gay. Michael, let's start with you. What is currently the state of play in the House?
Yeah, so I'm right now in the basement of the Capitol. I just came from the House chamber where essentially things are at a standstill. The House had a series of votes, 3 votes that were procedural votes in advance of voting on the final passage of this big, beautiful bill. Now, the third procedural vote in this series was the key one. That would officially allow folks to open up debate and tee up that final vote. Now, in the lead up, a number of these hardline conservative critics of the bill were vowing to vote against that procedural vote. And if they were successful in tanking it, it would have brought the House floor to a standstill. So right now, as you can see on your screen right there, the House is still voting on that second of the 3 votes. But because the votes aren't there, Republicans don't yet have enough support. Leaders are leaving this vote open. It was supposed to be just a 5-minute vote. It's been running for more than an hour and a half at this point, and it's going on as lawmakers are behind the scenes with House GOP leaders and other members of the administration with folks trying to get these hardliners on board. This is the hardline conservatives, several members of the House Freedom Caucus, who we so often speak about, who are concerned about the deficit impact the deficit impact of this piece of legislation. Now, aside from those hardline conservatives, as you mentioned, Alicia, there are also a number of moderate Republicans who are really concerned about the impact these Medicaid cuts and the rollback of green energy tax credits could have on constituents in their district. So right now, to sum it up, leaders are behind the scenes trying to pick off these holdouts in an effort to clear this procedural hurdle and get onto debate and then a final vote on the legislation.
Congresswoman Dean, you know, July 4th, that is an arbitrary deadline set by the President of the United States. There's no reason this has to be jammed through right now. Your sense of whether Republicans are going to pass this bill by his deadline?
I guess my question, Alicia, is why would anybody vote for this bill, Republican or Democrat? That's what I really believe. I don't know what they're going to be successful in doing, but I brought with me the bill, which I assure you that most of the Senate did not read, and the House is struggling to read. But why read it? Because why would anybody vote for this? After all, it steals health care from 17 million Americans. I'm in touch with my governor, Governor Shapiro. He is pointing out exactly the harm this will do to Pennsylvanians. It is taking food away from children, from families, 42 million Americans. Who would ever vote for this? It kills jobs right in Pennsylvania, energy jobs. 27,000 jobs will be killed. So this is an economic drain as well. But let's remember what it's all about. This is about tax cuts for the wealthy that will blow up the deficit by $5 trillion. Take a look at these volumes. As I said, why would anyone vote for Trump's terrible, big, ugly bill?
As a producer, I just want to salute whoever created the prop, because I understand the production value that goes into making sure that that message is clear and that does not get lost. And to your point, they were writing this and redlining this as they were voting on it. Do you get the sense that Republicans in the Senate, in the House, even fully understand the implications of the legislation they have put forth?
Of course they don't. As I said, and as you pointed out, this is more than a prop. It's to say it is our job to understand what is in these bills. The senators voted on this not knowing exactly what was in the bill. I bet they love the part about no sales tax on silencers. Really, folks? We want to make silencers more plentiful in this country at the behest of somebody like the representative who owns gun stores. Conflicts of interest abound. The taking away of health care. Rural hospitals will suffer. I think of nursing homes. My own in-laws in their final years were in a very humble nursing home, supported by Medicaid because they had worked hard their whole life. Think of the anxiety this will put on our seniors who in their final years that deserve dignity. That's what they deserve. But instead, the callous folks who put this bill together, they're corrupt. Cruelty is the point. But how can these folks vote for it? I want to point out specifically in Pennsylvania. I asked my representatives in Pennsylvania, my delegation, in the Pennsylvania 1st, Mr. Fitzpatrick, an estimated 19,000 people will lose health care. In the Pennsylvania 7th, Mr. McKenzie, an estimated 24,000 people will lose health care. In the Pennsylvania 8th, Mr. Bresnahan, an estimated 28,000 of your constituents will lose their health care. That's something you want to vote for? And in the Pennsylvania 10th, Mr. Perry, an estimated 21,000 of your constituents will lose health care. Not to mention what's going to happen with food and agriculture and farmers. This is a shameful set of proposals. Many of my colleagues who have been here longer than I have said they've never seen a more morally bankrupt bill ever.
Maura, very early in this process, someone said something to me that distilled the axis on which Congress is making its decisions, which is, what are the rest of us willing to sacrifice in order for millionaires and for billionaires to get these massive tax cuts? And it does seem to me that that point has broken through with American voters. You've seen all the same polling that I've seen on this bill, but I want to underline something that seemed a little new. This is from the Washington Post today. Reducing taxes on corporations only has 19% support. 17% support for reducing Medicaid funding, 11% for cuts to SNAP. You don't have to dig too hard. You don't have to look too many polls. They're all saying the same thing. Republicans know this. They have Tom Tillis screaming it on the Senate floor. So what? So why?
Well, there's a couple things to say about that. First of all, a poll of Americans last month showed a 2-to-1 opposition among Americans for the bill overall. So there's no question that this is deeply unpopular. Also, if you think about the kind of populism and support for the middle class that is popular, we see that nowhere here. And that's something that drives the politics right now, both in Trump's base and among Democrats. That's nowhere here. So this is a wealth transfer to the richest Americans who already have the largest share of the pie at to a historic proportion already. So, there's no question that this bill is not something that Republicans, especially in competitive districts, want to go home and run on. I think it is an inflection point, though, for several reasons. One is that Congress has largely been kind of a do-nothing Congress, a rubber stamp for Donald Trump, the Republicans have so far. But this is a moment where the president is actually asking them to betray people who actually voted for them and for Donald Trump. I mean, the impact on rural America is stunning, and you see that in the coverage. Anybody who's paying attention knows, these Medicaid cuts are going to hurt Trump's voters. They're going to hurt all Americans, but they're going to hurt Trump's voters. An end to Medicaid expansion in certain areas. I mean, this is going to be brutal. And so I think one of the questions, too, is who is paying attention? Because the media environment is so diffuse right now. And so the Democrats, really, it's incumbent on them to make sure that the American people know who is to blame when they are suffering. You see kind of some daylight around that. I think Tom Tillis's decision to retire out of North Carolina, and kind of waving his arms, as you said, saying there's something rotten here. That kind of helps. You've seen videos of just individual Americans and groups of people who depend on Medicaid coming onto Capitol Hill asking Republican members of Congress, are you going to turn away these children, people who have disabilities, people who rely on this health care coverage, and just being ignored? That kind of will break through. But ultimately, whether or not the Republicans pay a political price, that's incumbent on Democrats. It also depends on whether these Republican members of Congress believe that they're going to pay a higher price with their own constituents or with the man in the White House.
Correct. I mean, I think there's the messaging, Congresswoman, then I think there's the lived experience of people as they start to realize they no longer have access to some of these benefits, in many cases by attrition, because they've changed deadlines and they've complicated paperwork and they've made it harder for people to access services they should be able to receive. I want you to take a listen, since you referenced farmers, to something that Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said on CNBC about the bill.
But what about the Medicaid cuts? I mean, the Democrats have obviously made a lot about that politically, but just in reality, Secretary Rollins, there is concern about what it means for rural communities.
I know the Senate really leaned into that as well, but here's what I know, and I've got many, many years of working in public policy, not just in agriculture. The Medicaid program itself is very broken. You have states that under the weight of Medicaid are going bankrupt. You have big, huge parts of the program that are unworkable. There will never be a time in this country where people won't have access to health care.
Can you help me make sense of that, Congresswoman Dean?
No, but that seems to be the very failed playbook of this administration. They claim an institution that so many Americans rely upon for so many different needs is broken, and therefore they're going to shutter it. That is simply not true. Medicaid is an extraordinary support for so many, for children, for folks with disabilities, as I said, for folks in nursing homes. The other programs regarding SNAP and supporting our farmers as we make sure that no American goes hungry. This country is plentiful, and yet we have people going hungry. This will make people more hungry. So I don't know what the secretary's talking about. She's absolutely wrong. And I want to tell you from my constituents, they get it. They know exactly what's going on here. Our phones have been ringing off the hook, so much so that we all pitched in. I was answering phones today, and people were surprised to get me. And they said, I'm calling just to say, Mad, I know you're going to vote no on this bill because it's going to hurt us. It's going to make our costs higher. It is corrupt. It is cynical. It is cruel. And I said, you're absolutely right. You're onto it. My constituents see it by a vast majority. This is a corrupt, cruel bill, and it is all at the service of a president. He has a bunch of courtiers here, Republican members of the House who are not doing their job. They are acting as courtiers to this emperor, this would-be emperor, not looking at the content of the bill, lying about it when they talk about we're going to do work requirements. That is nonsense, and they know it. Kaiser Family Foundation shows that more than 90% of those on Medicaid are working. What are they doing? They're putting in paperwork requirements because they want to trip up anybody that is taking good care of themselves and their family through the use of Medicaid. They want to have people trip so that they get tossed off by cynical comments like what you just showed from the Agriculture Secretary. I'm extraordinarily troubled by this. I hope that today the predictions are that this bill could fail of its own weight, that there are at least 11 Republican members who are a no on this. For whatever reasons, they're a no. I hope it falls of its own disastrous weight. But if it should pass, I think this spells the end of this Republican cult, because we will make sure that these members are held to account for these votes that directly harm their constituents.
Mike, can you just talk me through your reporting as it relates to what Congresswoman Dean just said there, both your reporting around the likelihood that this could in fact fail, that there are not enough Republican votes to get it over the finish line, and if it does in fact fail, what then happens next?
So your first question, and really the answer to both of those, is that it's a moving target, and this is a moving story by the minute. Earlier this morning, I had spoken to a handful of House Republicans, including Chairman Andy Harris. He's the chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, who said he planned to vote against this procedural effort for this Trump mega bill, and that others were going to join him. And as a result, that procedural hurdle was going to fail. And if that happened, then the House floor would come to a standstill, because you can't debate and vote on a bill unless you clear this procedural hurdle. Now, as I had mentioned before, we are over officially the 2-hour mark of one of these procedural votes remaining open, because House Republican leaders do not have the votes. Now, I'm listening to reporting from my colleagues who are outside the room. I'm talking to folks myself, and it seems as though some of that opposition appears to be softening a little bit. Take, for example, somebody like Congressman Ralph Norman. He's a Republican from South Carolina. Earlier this morning, I had spoken to him. He said that he needed changes to the Senate bill in order to win over his support. By the way, change is highly unlikely in this scenario. House Republican leaders have no appetite to change the bill, and that would require it going back to the Senate for a final stamp of approval, and we know how that process just went down over the weekend. So Ralph Norman saying he wasn't going to support the bill unless he got changes. He popped out of that room with other holdouts and leadership just a few minutes ago and said he had a positive meeting at the White House with President Trump, that he and other administration officials had walked folks through some parts of the bill that they didn't understand initially or they weren't aware about initially, sort of starting to change his tune a little bit. Now, he said that he can't say that he's going to be a yes on this effort or a no on this effort just yet. But the fact that he's opening up the possibility without changes shows that some of that opposition may be softening. Now, that's just one individual. That's just one person in this conservative group. There are still a number of moderate Republicans who are concerned about those Medicaid cuts and about that rollback of green energy tax credits. But really, at this moment, it's unclear what the fate of this procedural vote will be. I just reported a few minutes ago that House Republican leaders told members that they can actually leave the chamber and head back to their offices because they don't expect this logjam to be solved for a little bit. So things are very fast moving right now, slow moving also, a lot up in the air. But if this procedural vote were to fail, that would be a seismic blow for Speaker Johnson, House Republican leaders, and President Trump. As I mentioned, bringing the House chamber to a standstill, you can't do anything unless you clear this procedural hurdle, and also an embarrassing blow for folks as they're trying to muscle this legislation through by Friday, July 4th.
Okay, we only have about 30 seconds left, but I have to say, Mar, I've sort of seen this movie before, and we generally know how it ends, where at the end of the day, these folks get bullied, cajoled, threatened with primaries, and they come around and they vote for Donald Trump's agenda. But I have found watching this process play out interesting because the fissures within MAGA world are becoming clear. Even if that doesn't change their votes, they do seem to be more willing to articulate where the points of differential are.
Well, that's right. It's a roadmap to their vulnerabilities outside their relationship with Donald Trump. So you can tell that they have looked at polling in their districts and they've looked at the races they're going to face, and they're looking at this bill saying this is a problem.
Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, Michael Schnell, thank you both so much.